Welcome everyone to what we hope will be a very special bonus episode of the Exiles Network News. Today, we're going to be bringing you our speculative, spoiler-free preview of the ninth and final chapter of the Skywalker saga that has been so influential in many of our lives. Now, at this point, I should say that although this episode will be spoiler-free and we have avoided alleged plot leaks that have surfaced online, we will have free reign to speculate and make educated guesses based on what we've seen in the trailers and any supplementary materials that we may have read. So with that disclaimer, be warned, and let's go. I'm joined today by two of my regular Exiles cohorts, Christian and Lupe, who you'll know from our weekly news podcast, and in Christian's case, our in-progress Star Wars Rogue Squadron 4-part retrospective look at the Star Wars saga, which you can listen to on our sister channel, the Exiles Network. So, hello, Christian. Hello, Lupe.
What's going on, man? How are you today?
I'm looking forward to this one, Christian.
I
Nice
am
to have
too.
you guys joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here, man.
Hey guys, it's Lupe here. I'm excited for this one. I haven't been on any Star Wars podcast, so I'm a virgin, and be gentle.
We may shame you publicly, but it's all in good fun, don't worry.
It's not just foreplay.
Yeah, exactly. We all have our things we're into. So tonight we also have a special guest appearance from a lifelong friend of mine and a fellow lifelong Star Wars fan. My friend Craig, who I've known since we were two. He is also from the Last Dragon Tribute. This is a fan site that he hosts. He's also a huge promoter and supporter of the 80s Kung Fu classic, The Last Dragon, which we'll let Craig plug his show at the end of our Star Wars preview. So Craig, welcome, and looking forward to having you join us today.
Awesome, guys. Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. I love Star Wars, and I've been behind the scenes watching, listening to what you guys are doing, and really been enjoying what you guys have been up to. And yeah, I haven't talked a lot about Star Wars in my time with what I do at The Last Dragon, but I'm always thinking about it. I love this stuff so much. So yeah, I can't wait to talk about it today.
Well, Craig and I, we probably spend a few hours a week talking about Star Wars on my commute to and from work. So
Right.
this is nothing new for us, but first time recording it and sharing it with the public. So, gentlemen, before we dive into the questions that are burning in our minds going into the Rise of Skywalker, I'd like each of you just to share with our listeners a very brief history of your Star Wars fandom. Let us know how you feel about, at a very high level, the trilogies going in, specifically the sequel trilogy, heading into this final chapter. So Christian, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm currently wearing Star Wars pajama bottoms, and there's 3 Star Wars Christmas decorations in my living room. So I'm a big Star Wars fan. I'm a nerd. All right, I love this stuff. I can't get enough of it, and it goes back to when I was a kid. The Episode 4 came out when I wasn't born yet, but by the time Empire Strikes Back came out, I was a child, and my mother loved Star Wars, and she got me into it at a very young age, and I think her connection to it is really what that helped with my connection to it. That's what brought me into it. My dad was always more like, about Star Wars. He enjoyed it, but it didn't really mean a lot to him. But my mother really is what got me into it. So I've loved it ever since I was a little kid. It helped me connect with her. Not Rise of Skywalker, Revenge of the Sith, I got a chance to see with her in the theater. And it's just been a part of my life ever since. I love the stories, the characters, the freaking toys. Take your pick. So I love everything about it. The extended universe, I'm all into that as well. So I can't get enough of this stuff, and that's why I'm really excited to be talking about this here. And I'm looking for the future after we get past Rise of Skywalker.
Awesome, Lupe. What's your history with Star Wars? You mentioned briefly you're more of the casual fan, the general audience. Let us know about your experience with Star Wars.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be an ambassador for the casual fan, the general audience type of person. I've been in and out of, Star Wars interest all my life. It's not my personal fandom. I can't claim to be a huge Star Wars fan, but it's so popular that if you want to be engaged with the conversation, you do need to see some of the movies, you need to play some of the games, and I've had mixed feelings about, different things. For example, the OG trilogy, which Star Wars fans swear by, I think they're overrated apart from Empire Strikes Back. I know that someone wants to lop my head off with a lightsaber for saying that.
That's why I muted myself, Lupe. I've been cursing you off.
Feel free. The prequels, a mixed bag as well. I do love Revenge of the Sith. I think it's one of the greatest Star Wars, movies out there. I love what they've done with the video games, like Knights of the Old Republic. I think that really brought something new and something historic and really built the world out. And that really made me respect the franchise a lot more. In terms of the new trilogy, um, I liked The Force Awakens at first for, what it was, a popcorn blockbuster film. But upon further review, it's just a copy of a New Hope. I really like The Last Jedi, but I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. And that's kind of where I lie with the franchise, as someone who has a casual interest in it, and I watch the movies and play the video games so that I'm a part of the conversation, the popular conversation. And to be sincere, I don't really care too much where the franchise goes. If it falters, good. If it doesn't, whatever. So that's where I stand.
Okay, Craig, where do you stand with the franchise?
All right. Well, as you said, we've been loving this movie forever. These movies forever. My parents tell me it was too young to even remember, but the original Star Wars was one of the first movies I ever saw. Actually, the second movie I ever saw at the movie theater. And when it came on TV, my brother Mike, we recorded it on VHS, and we watched that thing every single day before school, twice on Saturdays and Sundays. So it was ingrained in my mind as a little kid. And just even back then, I can just remember this, just the folklore about the whole thing is just, there's so much more going on than even we're watching in the movies, and we want more. And we played out those with the toys. Like, we created our own world that fit into this massive universe. And George Lucas, he just created this spark that just in our little minds made this massive world of, we had all these questions about what the Jedi were about, and we had these little teasers. I can remember Paul's dad, when we were little, used to talk about how Darth Vader was Anakin, and how he got in a fight with Obi-Wan and was pushed into a lake of lava. So we knew this when we were little kids, and then we saw it happen in Revenge of the Sith, and it all played out. And not every detail of the prequels was perfect, but the grand story is still there, and it's still beautiful. And I still love that the general story has been so great. And and that leads us into where we are now. And it's very difficult to take over from a genius like George Lucas to match his vision. And Disney has a difficult task, and it's not easy. So of course there's a bit of a letdown with what they've done, and I'm a little concerned about a lot of things that we'll get into. But I have hope that this last one helps to bring it together, and hopefully things turn out pretty well. Last Jedi, no, I didn't love it. Force Awakens, I kind of feel a lot like what Lupe said about The Force Awakens. I liked it at first, but it was a good introduction to bring it back. So I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it. It was fun, but it was missing a lot of the bigger folklore. And The Last Jedi was just, I've got some issues with that. I want to like it, but I'm having trouble. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm going to bite my tongue on The Last Jedi for now. But as you mentioned, this has been a part of our lives since we were very young. You also mentioned that it was a part of my my relationship, not only with you guys as my friends, but with my parents. My father was into it. Even my mother was into it. Later in life, as we love the original trilogy, but as young adults, as young single adults, I remember being pretty disappointed by the prequels. I didn't hate them. I still went out and bought the DVDs, rewatched them at least once, but I wasn't a diehard prequel fan by any means. It wasn't until Disney revived the franchise with The Force Awakens that it perfectly aligned with our daughters' ages. Craig, both yourself and myself, our daughters were what were they, 4 when this came out, when the Force Awakens came out?
Yep.
So it was a perfect time to introduce our children to Star Wars, and part of that was going back and rewatching the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, prior to going to see Force Awakens in theater, and watching the prequels with my daughter, and then the Clone Wars animated series, which I had really no interest in as a single adult male, but learned to love after watching the prequels with my daughter. What I should say about the prequels is when you watch those through the eyes of a child, you're more forgiving of some of the flaws of those prequels, and you really appreciate the story and the action and the adventure and the pacing that George Lucas provides, despite some of the things that may have bothered you. And the Clone Wars really enhances that. So I really love the prequels and the Clone Wars now. Now, to reiterate what you guys have said about The Force Awakens, having watched that with my daughter, again, I was forgiving of some of the faults. It was a rehash of A New Hope, but they set up a lot of interesting storylines that I was really excited about seeing going forward. I liked having a female lead for my daughter to take enjoyment in the same way I took enjoyment in Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. And it started off well, but I lost interest in Rebels, and then boy, did The Last Jedi just derail things. So at least in my opinion. So I was very disappointed by The Last Jedi, and I thought that it cheapened and worsened The Force Awakens because it threw away most of what I loved about The Force Awakens. So like you guys have said, or like you said, Craig, I have concerns about the franchise under Disney, especially after The Last Jedi. And we'll see where that goes from here. So now that we set the stage, let's just jump into our preview. Let's get to our thoughts, our theories, our hopes, our expectations for the upcoming film, The Rise of Skywalker. Despite leaving off on a negative tone there, I guess, about my thoughts on The Last Jedi, I am excited about this movie. So I'm optimistic, at least cautiously optimistic. So let's start off first and foremost at a high level. Following the end of The Last Jedi, let's talk briefly about where we left off in that film and where you guys think we go from here. So Christian, let's start off because you're our resident Last Jedi supporter. How did you feel we left off, and where do you think we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you guys are coming from when you talk about Force Awakens and also Last Jedi, and you know what? I'll give you a take. I think Last Jedi is better than all three of the prequels. I really enjoy where they took the franchise. I thought Force Awakens was good, but you're looking at a rehash of basically Episode 4, and The Last Jedi, to me, took some of the things about Star Wars that maybe were bothering me and ended it. And one of the biggest things was, why does it always have to be a Skywalker that's saving the universe and has to be the chosen one all the time? Rey potentially being a nobody and still being maybe just as powerful as the Emperor, or just as powerful as Yoda, I think is extremely important for the future of the franchise. Potentially getting rid of Snoke and things like that. I'll give it to you this way. I think Last Jedi left the Star Wars franchise in a weird spot. It was a very divisive film. It's not, that's nothing shocking to say on this particular pod. It divided the franchise even more than Empire Strikes Back did. It divided the franchise more than the prequels did. But it was a more cerebral movie. And when you look at what happened at the end, the Resistance is basically smashed. Leia talked about them having friends. We don't know where those friends are. They're out there somewhere. The First Order is now under the control of Kylo Ren, Darth Vader Jr., who basically is a teenager, and he's subject to these fits of rage and stuff like that, so we don't know what's going to happen there. So at a high level, I think it left the franchise off in a bit of a confused space, but to me, it's in a space that I really like where it could potentially go, especially when you see the child on the slave planet at the end of the movie just subtly moved that broomstick into his hand. I thought that was very important and very hopeful for the future as well. There's certain things that we will get into later that I don't necessarily need to see. So that's why I'm not necessarily concerned about if they are left off of the franchise moving forward. I want to see a good closing to Rise of Skywalker and quote unquote the Skywalker saga. I would like to see them move on from that, though, after this. So I hope from a high level that's what we're getting. But like I said, I'm very positive about where we left off from Last Jedi. This movie touched me, and I don't know why. It was emotional. It was powerful. I liked the characters. I just really wish we didn't get the Rose Finn side quest. I'll just say that. I'll just leave that out there before I put it to Lupe. That's the one thing I wish we didn't get. But so from a high level, that's where I think we left off, is kind of in a confused place. So I think it's going to be kind of tough. I'll end it on this. J.J. Abrams is a bit of a safer director, right? And I think it's possible that he will take some of those fan theories that we've all been kind of passing around back and forth on Reddit, Twitter, things like that, and he might try to force some of those things in. So if you're a Last Jedi supporter, it is possible that you could you could shake your head at the end of this movie and be slightly disappointed. However, if you didn't like The Last Jedi, you might now all of a sudden turn around and be like, you know what, thank you, JJ, because you're going to take some of that stuff in Force Awakens that I really liked, and you're going to bring it home for me.
Fair enough. Lupe?
Well, I know you said that Christian is our resident Last Jedi supporter, but I'm going to have to encroach on his territory a little bit. He's going to have to share that title with me because, yeah, I didn't mention The Last Jedi is actually my favorite Star Wars movie.
Lupe,
Yeah.
my respect level for you just went up, baby. It just went
thank
up.
you very much.
I mean, I always loved you, but come on, now I know why.
I had to mute myself there for a second.
What's going on here?
And curse off in the same pod. It's great.
I mean, for me, it's because I feel like Star Wars needed to expand its mythology. It needed to expand the lore. It needed to expand sort of what it was doing. I know that there's this whole thing people say about how Star Wars is like poetry and it's supposed to reverberate, but I just feel like, in my opinion, that's a lazy excuse for doing the same thing over and over again. And what Ryan Johnson, who the fandom menace call Ruin Johnson,
So ridiculous.
what he did with The Last Jedi was he just basically went against the grain. He deconstructed a lot of the characters, a lot of the mythology, really questioned who the Jedi are, questioned who heroes are in that universe, questioned, legacies and relationships. And I also like the fact that, we saw some new Force powers, which was, I mean, after 30 years, we just saw new Force powers in a new Star Wars movie. That was long overdue. So just a bunch of that stuff. And I like my movies to question heroes. And although I do understand why people don't like it, because Luke is, like Superman, John Connor, Neo type figure in Star Wars saga. And although I have no problem with him, faltering, making a mistake, redeeming himself, the only thing that I kind of agree with, fans who don't like it about is ending his legacy right there. I think that there was an opportunity to continue with him in, like future installments or whatever. But overall, absolutely love the movie. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Let's end it right there before you dig yourself any deeper. Craig, what do you think?
I don't see what how just going against the grain in The Last Jedi makes it such a great movie. I just don't see that. I don't know what to say.
I left you speechless.
You're not wrong, Craig. It was going against the sake of the grain. In my opinion, it was going against the grain for the sake of going against the grain.
Like, just not giving us answers just to subvert expectations doesn't make it good. Like, I like the idea of being different. I've been different my whole life, and this is important because this is why I can handle people having a different opinion than me. I've always been different. I grew up in a small town. I'm mixed. I'm black and white. I've always been different. There weren't very many people like me around anyways. So
I think there was 3 of you in our town, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 5.
It doesn't bother me to have a difference of opinion. I can get along with people because I wouldn't have been able to grow up without it. So that's cool. But I just having there were you were talking about new Force powers. I agree with that. But there were new Force powers in The Force Awakens. Kylo Ren holding a blaster bolt in the air. Rey having a vision when she picked up the lightsaber. That stuff is there. We haven't had a movie in so long. There wasn't any time to create this new stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, sure, he made some bold decisions, but he made it a pure comedy, like right off the bat, by having Yo Mama jokes thrown in there and Luke tossing the lightsaber over his shoulder like an episode of Hee Haw. I was just waiting for the Benny Hill music to kick in. Like, what is going on here? Like, it's just we're waiting for 2 years to see what's going to happen when he grabs that lightsaber and he throws it over his shoulder like a comedy. It's just, and this whole time I'm trying to enjoy it. I'm like, okay, it's okay. I'll let that go. I'll let it go. I'll let it go. And it continued to get bad. So I've almost forgotten the question. I'm sorry. Where do we go from here? So question. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, yeah, that's the question. Where do you go from here, right? I mean, you got the question. I don't know if there's a good answer, but
well, that's it. So for a Last Jedi fan, it's almost like it's like wrapped. It's almost wrapped up. I don't know what it's kind of left. There's a few people left, and where do you go from here? For me, I'll just leave it. I still want answers from The Force Awakens, so I'm really looking forward to those questions we had about the Knights of Ren, Snoke. We still need to know what's going on with Rey, and we're going to talk about all these things today. So I want my answers from Force Awakens.
I echo those sentiments. So here's where I think we go from here. Finn wakes up. It's the end of episode 7. He wakes up from his coma, and it's a Dallas do-over. It's Pam waking up. Bobby's in the shower. He didn't die after all, and everyone's happy. We pick it up like episode 8 never happened.
Everyone's happy.
I don't think anybody's happy. I don't think
Christian, just to be clear, my opinion's more worthwhile than yours. So,
I quit.
Kidding aside, no, I'm sorry, I'm kidding, not kidding aside, but that's honestly how I feel with The Last Jedi. Is yeah, like just scrap it. Let's just have Finn wake up and start fresh, right? Because it's not the characterization of Luke. I think that's a false narrative that a lot of people put forward. Now, granted, there's a small segment that's
there are a lot of people that don't like that, but yeah, for me too, that didn't bother me as much.
It's like the Superman haters. I mean, you got that segment, but that's not the issue. The issue is, like I mentioned, there was elements of Force Awakens that I liked, and what I liked was the new storylines they set up. Who is Snoke? Where did he come from? How did he rise to power? Who is Rey? How did she get so powerful without any training? Who are the Knights of Ren? They look really interesting. I want to know more about them. I was interested in Captain Phasma, although they screwed her up in The Force Awakens. That was the kind of stuff I wanted to see, and The Last Jedi didn't deliver on any of that. And in fact, like you said, to me, it intentionally went out of its way, I think, to throw away fan theories. And I think that because we spent 2 years eagerly anticipating this movie, speculating, throwing out every possible theory for each of these questions, I think the creatives were just like, wow, these guys have, like, somewhere someone has guessed the answer to every one of these things. And I think Rian Johnson thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to just, instead of answering the question and proving someone right, I'm just going to throw the question away. And like you said, I don't think that's smart. I don't think there's anything intellectual or admirable about that approach. I think he took a lazy way out by throwing the questions away. So where do we go from here? Well, Last Jedi was fairly unsatisfying. I am, at least to me, I'm joking that I think he's going to wake up and have it all be a dream, but I really do think that would be the best approach. But realistically, we look at where that movie ended, and there was a small group of rebels or resistance, I guess, left, flying away in the Millennium Falcon. Kylo Ren and what's left of the First Order, I guess I'm not even sure how much is left of the First Order, is down on Crate. And it just feels like it kind of ended. So where do you go? And I think the answer is you got to start picking up some of the things they threw away from The Force Awakens that people were interested in. And I think they're going to do that. I think JJ is in a fan service. I think he's a safe director. I feel good about Chris Terrio being part of this because he's an intelligent writer, and I think he's going to surprise us with some good stuff. But I'm very concerned about the humor. I hated the humor in The Last Jedi. I was tempted to leave when they started off with that whole Spaceball style prank call nonsense. If I hadn't just dropped $40 on food and booze, I would have been out of there. And it just got worse, like you said, with the milking and the lightsaber toss and So anyway, that's the question, right? Is where do we go from here? And I think the answer is we have to try and pick up the pieces that were thrown away at the end of Force Awakens. And that sort of leads us into our questions for the evening. So with that, let's jump into the next question. So the first question, really, I think that's on a lot of people's minds is what's Luke's role going to be in this film? Is he going to be in the film? Is he still alive? Is he a Force ghost? What do you guys expect? What do you want to see? So Christian, let's start off with you.
Luke has always had like this kind of almost Jesus-like kind of, he's that kind of figure throughout the franchise. And I think he was responsible for the redemption of his father and everything like that. And they expected him to be really powerful, so powerful in the Force. I disagree a little bit with you guys with what you said before. I think you and Craig, especially Paul, you guys may feel that was not like a lot of the hate that was directed towards The Last Jedi wasn't from that. But every time I turned around, somebody was complaining about Luke Skywalker and his arc. The Reddit subreddits I'm in and done stuff like that. Everybody just complains about Luke and how he was handled. And I think there were a lot of fan theories about Luke Skywalker and what he was going to do, and he didn't. And in the end, he also did probably one of the most selfless things that he could possibly do by sacrificing himself for his friends and not harming a hair on Kylo Ren's head at the same process, and presented a truly staggering force power by doing that. So I don't believe he's alive. Definitely not. Now, it's pretty much been confirmed, I think, by everything that we've all been reading, that Luke is in this movie in some role. My guess is he returns as a Force ghost. He is that powerful. He's already shown that he has the ability to do that. But one of the points that Luke was trying to make in Last Jedi was maybe it was time for the Jedi to end. And we know from the expanded universe that they've played a lot with this theory of a gray Jedi, somebody who doesn't necessarily follow the light or isn't necessarily tempted by the dark side. And perhaps that's the way forward. That's really what needs to be done. Someone who embraces the Force and what it is, the fact that it does bind the universe together. And you don't necessarily have to be a religious follower of the Jedi or the cult of the Sith in order to find the way forward. That in order to be a guide, in order to be somebody to look up to, in order to be someone that a rebellion can follow, maybe you do have to be a gray. Maybe sometimes you have to do things that could be questionable in order to move forward. And it seemed like he was starting to figure that out. So I could see him potentially being kind of like a Force ghost that is pushing Rey in a direction. Maybe he could also be somebody that brings a connection to the past, and we get a little bit of a Yoda or an Anakin Skywalker sighting in this particular movie. So I think that's where Luke is, and I think that's where he's going to be coming from in this movie. My guess is he doesn't really have a very substantial role, but JJ's going to want to do something, especially considering how he was received in Last Jedi, and he's just too important. You're going to call the thing Rise of Skywalker, you're not going to have him in? That doesn't make any sense. So I'll throw it back to Lupe and see what he thinks.
Okay, well, for me, before I dive deeper, I'm going to have to defend The Last Jedi a little bit to say that I don't think that Rian Johnson just made the film to spite people who had theories or just to go against the grain for going against the grain's sake. I think he actually wanted to tell a story, his own story. And he told it in the most authentic, fun way that he felt that he should. And I think the crux of his story in the larger context of things is that everybody's waiting for this savior. But at the end of the day, the person who's going to save themselves or save the universe or whatever is going to be Rey. It's her journey. It's her story. It's not Luke Skywalker's. And so while everyone, including the people in the film, were thinking, oh, Luke is just going to swoop in with all these magical force powers and is going to be a demigod and is going to save the day, at the end of the day, he was going through his own thing. He's just a normal person who, even though he's older and wiser, just has, the same problems as anyone, has suffered loss, has suffered grief, has made mistakes. And this saga is a journey about a new hero finding their own place in the universe. And I don't think he did that just for the sake of that. And I think there's a beauty in that. And I think, for the fan theories and stuff like that, obviously that's part of the whole Star Wars, fandom. That's, fan theory, speculation. There's no other fandom that does it as well as the Star Wars, fandom. Maybe DC fandom are a close second, but nobody competes with Star Wars fans. But I think that's why people have to be careful about, cementing their theories and what they want to see. Don't set it in stone, because if it doesn't happen and there's been this consensus in the fandom that, oh, we have to see this happen, it's going to be amazing to see this happen, blah blah, if it doesn't happen, then you're going to get disappointed. And at the same time, if directors are making films to make sure that happens, that's not artistic. That isn't true art. That's just making product. That's almost like making fast food. So there's this fine line that fans have to walk and directors have to walk as well to make sure that we get good movies that are told from a place of authenticity. So in terms of where I think they should go going forward, I just want to see Rey's journey. I want to see her connection to the Force, her connection to Kylo Ren as well. I want to see their place in the new order, no pun intended, in the new order of things. And I'd like to see some powerful storytelling. At the end of the day, in all our films, usually the good guys win and the bad guys lose. I wouldn't mind seeing, something new, something interesting with those tropes that we've, come to know. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Okay, Craig, what do you see for Luke in this film? What do you think how is JJ going to pull this off?
Yeah. So, and one thing, just last time I'm going to talk about The Last Jedi, just going back one time. I actually did like the Luke, Rey, and Kylo arc in the film. That was interesting. Maybe I didn't agree with every little thing, but hey, it's not my movie. That was very interesting. Everything else just was not. So to Luke in this film, what I find really interesting is that in the original script for Return of the Jedi, when it was called Revenge of the Jedi, the original script had Obi-Wan coming back. I think that was part of the power that he's talking about. Like, when you kill me, when he's talking to Darth Vader and says, when I die, I'm going to be more powerful than you could ever imagine. It wasn't just the Force Ghost. It was a whole new world where you could go to the become one with the Force and then actually come back and bring all that learning you learned from the Netherworld. So anyway, in that script, he does actually come back and helps Luke defeat the Emperor in the end. So maybe that could be something that gets tied into this movie, is that Luke actually does find a way to come back to life, and it's still Rey's story, but he helps Rey defeat the Emperor, or whatever, however the Emperor is in the movie, the big evil in the end. So it's possible. It's all about execution. It's all about execution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to say that, because we get that argument thrown at us all the time about BVS. If only it's the execution that was the problem, but there is some truth to that. I sort of echo your sentiments a little bit, although I don't know how far they're going to go into the deeper nooks and crannies of the extended universe and original story treatments, I guess. I do think that he's going to have a role, right? You've got to appease the Luke fandom, and as much as I sort of downplayed that as being the reason that people dislike it, because it's certainly, I think, Craig, for you and I, not the reason we dislike it. They do have to appease that fairly loud vocal segment of the fandom some way. So I think Luke is going to be in the film. I tend to think he's going to be a Force ghost rather than a physical manifestation. Will you even see him as a ghost, or will you see him as the voice providing Rey guidance, sort of in the same way that Obi-Wan provided guidance to Luke in the trench run in the original Star Wars? I'm not sure, but he's got to have a role. It's got to be fairly significant to appease those people. I don't think it's going to be physical manifestation, and I don't know how. Like it's been said already, JJ is a safe director. I would not say that Chris Terrio is a safe writer. So whose voice carries through in the film the strongest? That's to be seen. But that's one of the big mysteries, and I can't pretend to have a definitive answer. Just that I think he will have a role, and I don't think it'll be a physical manifestation. Next, on a I guess a more tragic note, Carrie Fischer passed prior to the filming even beginning for Episode 9. So that leaves the question of how are they going to continue Leia's role in this film. Leia was alive at the end of The Last Jedi, and I believe, at least it was rumored, that at one point she was supposed to have one of the larger arcs in the 9th episode. So how much of that story is retained, if any, and what do you guys see Leia's role being in this film, and how do you think they're going to pull it off, given that Carrie Fisher was not around even to do any principal photography? Christian, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah. So Christian, what are your thoughts on Leia, and how do you think they're going to pull that off in this film?
Paul, what you said was right. Her passing was painful to not only Star Wars fans, but I think a lot of people, all over the place. And as someone who fights depression and things like that. She was always an advocate for mental health issues and stuff like that. So it's really sad to see Carrie Fisher gone. However, there were some interviews recently with J.J. Abrams talking about how she does still have a significant role. That doesn't necessarily mean a large role in Rise of Skywalker. It just means that she will have an impactful role in this movie, and most of it is probably going to be from old footage that they were able to piece together from The Last Jedi. It's possible that, you know, we never got a chance to really see if Leia had the Force. The only really hints that we had that she felt the Force, A, she's obviously the daughter of one of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy, and B, at the end of Return of the Jedi, she said, Luke's not dead, I can feel it. So obviously there's a connection there somewhere. So her having that Force ability isn't exactly a twist, but probably would have liked to have seen a little bit more of it in Force Awakens instead of it just kind of being popped into Last Jedi. Possible that she hid those Force powers for more political reasons, than maybe because she's kind of more of like a bureaucrat in that movie and stuff like that. So maybe that's why. For me, I think that her role is probably going to be more of a guide, maybe more of a teacher. She seemed to bring on more of a motherly role to Rey, and Rey is going to need that moving forward. She needs something. She right now has nothing in her life, and her parents sold her for drinking money, if we are to believe Kylo, which we know that could not necessarily be the truth. So I think she's going to wind up being more of like a teacher or a guide to Rey, kind of that motherly figure, and I am looking forward to seeing that. I think it's just, however, going to be very small. I don't believe they can do too much, but whatever they do, I really hope that they respect what came before it, because she is a very powerful presence, and I hope that they do that.
Lupe?
Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. Any loss of life is tragic, and this one impacted people in a profound way. She will be remembered fondly, always. I feel conflicted about it. The first thing is, obviously, because of the untimely fashion of her passing, they're a little bit hamstrung and handcuffed in terms of how they can give her a worthy send-off. So I think no matter what happens, even if quote unquote they fumble, even if they're not able to do the best job, people are going to give them a pass, even if, because we know the circumstances. It's not going to affect how people judge the movie if for some reason they have to do some shoddy CGI or jump through some plot holes, to get to a place where they can give her a send off in the saga. But if I was writing it, I would make it something along the lines of her getting assassinated or something like that, and then to uphold her legacy going forward, make sure that she is an inspirational figure for Rey, probably an influential figure on Kylo Ren, maybe in terms of a conscience and stuff he has to battle with. I would not be opposed to her having some Force Ghost appearances. Obviously, she is sensitive in the Force, although she's not as trained and powerful as someone like Luke was, or a fully fledged Jedi. So there are things that they can definitely do, and I just also hope that our friend J.J. Abrams doesn't milk it and use it to sell the movie and do fan service, because there's that contradiction there. You want to respect someone who passes, and you don't want to use their memory to be selling your movie and bringing fans along. So I hope that they're very wise in the way they do it. They have a tough job ahead of them, and I will cut them some slack, and I hope it plays out in a way that is worthy of the person she was.
Craig?
Yeah, I have to agree with everything that Lupe and Christian said. And I love Carrie Fisher, and my youngest daughter is named Leia, and my oldest daughter picked the name because she was a Star Wars fan. So
Awesome.
Yeah,
Apologize for interrupting. Awesome.
No, that's awesome.
So yeah, obviously it's kind of making me a little sad right now just thinking about it. And I just recently, during watching Frozen 2 with my kids, there was a preview for Rise of Skywalker, and seeing it on the big screen, and I got a little choked up, actually, just like sentimental, just seeing her up there. So yeah, and then I agree with Lupe that you don't want to play on that too hard, because it does tug at the heartstrings. But of course, that's what Disney does to us. So watch out. um, so yeah, all of those things you guys said. And yeah, I'm just really interested to see how they make this work. So I have high hopes that they just really, because it was talked about, in Colin Trevorrow's version that this was going to be her movie. And then, yeah, we've heard the interviews from JJ saying she's still a huge part of this, and they're able to work it in with only using footage and not using CGI. I'm pretty sure he said that they're not using any CGI, but I might
At
be
some point they
misquoting
said
that.
that.
Yeah, I don't know if that's changed. That
Yeah.
idea could be changed. It could be a misdirect. Who knows? It could be flashbacks. I do think, one thing that people talk about a lot is that they get mad at her using the Force in The Last Jedi, but it's been left out there. There's been so much time. We don't know how much training she's really had. We really don't know. I think a lot of people are assuming that just because we didn't see it, that Luke never trained her, but we really don't know how much she's been trained. So I'm thinking she was trained a lot, and maybe we'll get some of that, or we'll get answers to that. Was she trained? Wasn't she? How much was she? How will that play in? So I'm just really interested to see what they do with the character, and hopefully it's just executed well.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think you guys have covered it pretty thoroughly. So, just to echo your sentiments, I hope it's not overboard. I hope it's genuine. I think it's got to be somewhat brief because they're working with limited footage and they're trying to fit that into a new story. But I hope it's a satisfying send-off for the character, and we'll wait and be surprised on that one, I think. So next question, and I think this is maybe one of the biggest and most contentious questions that we're going to get to in this movie, is will we get an explanation of Rey's origins and power once and for all? I mean, one of the main criticisms against this film is that, or not against this film, but against this sequel trilogy, is that she's a Mary Sue. Wildly powerful, good at everything, with unearned, basically, no real training. And so far, the first movie hinted that there was an explanation. The second movie kind of threw that away and said, nah, she's nobody. So I guess the question is, where do you guys see this going? And does Rey's origin and source of her power matter? Is that something that's important to you? Or is it something that you appreciate, that she's not a Skywalker, she's not someone special, anyone can be the chosen one? So let's start with Christian. Christian, what are your thoughts on Rey's storyline and how they're going to tie that together in this film?
Yeah, I don't think it matters personally. I think it was more powerful to me in Last Jedi that her parents did sell her off for drinking money. Now again, we don't know if that's the truth, but that's what they said. And there were hints in Force Awakens that there's more than meets the eye, and we've seen a couple of interviews with J.J. Abrams that said that he is going to quote unquote respect what Rian Johnson did, because they were talking and things like that, and he respects his vision, but he might pop a little wrinkle in there for what's going on with Rey's origins. We repeat over and over again about how JJ is and the way he directs a movie. So do I believe we'll get one? Yeah, I think we are going to get some sort of an explanation, because it sounds like the fandom is kind of clamoring for it. It sounds like JJ is leaning in that direction. I don't think, maybe I'm just speaking out of what I want, so maybe I should preface that. I don't think he's going to go off the deep end and say, bang, she's related to Luke, or a direct descendant of, Anakin in some way, or some of the crazy fan theories that are going on out there that she's a clone of Palpatine. She's something like that. So I've seen those fan theories out there as well. I don't think they go that route. I just believe we're going to get some sort of explanation that says this is why Rey can feel the Force. She is not a quote unquote anybody, because I don't think that answer satisfies the majority of the fandom. So that's what I think.
Lupe, what are your thoughts on Rey?
Rey is the central figure in this Star Wars trilogy, and so there has to be a good explanation for why she's so powerful. To be sincere, there's nothing wrong with her being like super powerful. That's not the reason why people claim she's a Mary Sue. It's just that she doesn't make mistakes. That's that, at least in the Force Awakens. And that has to do with the fact that she could like fly, the Millennium Falcon like a boss, and she shoots things and hits them, and she says the perfect thing, and she it's not necessarily particularly about the Force. But in terms of her Force powers, I think it's very interesting. And I think that they may try to tie her somehow to Palpatine. If she's a clone of Palpatine, I think that will be bonkers, and I might not like it. But hey, if there's a good reason for it, then we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'd like to see the explanation. It doesn't have to be something familial. She doesn't have to be related to anyone, or she doesn't have to be, the one who's destined to, bring balance to the force. We know how that turned out the last time. But I think that they do need to explain why. And they need to make it organic. They need to make it kind of epic and interesting. And I'm curious to see how that plays itself out.
Great. And Craig?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just very interesting to know where our main character comes from and the whole mystery like that. I love that the Force Vision was one of my favorite parts of The Force Awakens,
Mm-hmm.
and her talking about her parents coming back, and then it just kind of left us hanging in The Last Jedi by saying, their parents were nobody, and the whole idea that that was kind of put in there to let everybody know that anyone can have the Force and anyone can save the day and give everybody hope. I think if you've been following along through these movies, you kind of know that Force users were born all the time. In the prequels, we know there were Jedi everywhere. They're born, they're kind of like a mutant, like you're just born with the Force. And it happens, you don't have to have parents that have the Force. I don't know if that's real. That hasn't probably been fleshed out very well in movies other than just showing it in the prequels. So maybe people need to be bashed over the head with it. But it's clear that, like I said, if you've been following around, that Force users are born all the time. So they're going to continue. This is happening. I guess it's been said that, the Force awakened in the movie with the title. So maybe it was dormant for a while and no new Jedi were being born, not Jedi, no new Force users were being born. But now that the Force is back, people must be. And, we're seeing that with the young kids. So yeah, I would just like to see more. I just think it's very interesting. And it's just a good piece of storytelling to tell us more about her background and yeah, possibly explain why she is so powerful. How she can do a lot of things with very little training. It'd be helpful, and I think Christian said it. It would help people to enjoy the movie a lot better as well. The people that are very upset about that sort of thing, which I'm not necessarily that upset about. It's one of those things that's like, it's not perfect. Luke had some issues with that as well. It's not as bad how quickly he learned, and he was trained, and it's not as bad, but it's just to another level with Rey.
Yeah, I kind of echo those sentiments as well. Now to me it does matter her origin. I think that's an important thing, and I think when I talked about earlier on that the parts of the Force Awakens that I was most interested in were thrown away. That Force vision was probably the thing I was most interested in. All the mysteries that were bundled up in that Force vision, and to toss that aside, and like you guys said, like she flew the Millennium Falcon in a way that Han Solo never could on her first attempt. It was absurd, and then to fight Kylo Ren with no training, and yeah, he was injured, and you can make excuses about the bowcaster, but I mean, come on, she defeated him on first lightsaber fight against the guy that's supposedly been training his whole life and is a powerful dark side Force user.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's a tough one, and the mind control right off the bat, like without even knowing that's a thing, she just pulled it off.
The Force Awakens, like it's one of my least favorite Star Wars movies. It's quite bad, to be sincere. When you break it down and really think about it, it might not be boring like the Clone Wars, but it's a movie that's riddled with so many problems.
Right, so you got damage to undo there, and so I don't care what the explanation is, but I need an explanation. I don't need to know she's a Skywalker. I think the way the story has progressed, she can't be Kylo's sister. That would be way too hard to pull off. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll go there because I think that's the origin of the character from the original Legends novels. But I think we strayed from that, and it's going to be a hard sell now. I don't love the clone idea. I don't care who she's a clone of. I don't like the idea that she's cloned from Luke's floating hand. Is she a descendant of Palpatine? Is she a descendant of Obi-Wan?
How much does she look like Shmi?
Yeah, how much does she look like Shmi? That's one of the
She
theories
looks
out
like
there.
that she went back in time and
Yeah, so someone else said she's a Leia clone. I mean, I don't care. Just whatever you do, explain it and sell me on it. And I'm going to be open-minded, but just give me something, right? I don't care what the answer is, but give me an answer. And make it work. So with that, to you, Chris Terrio, and do your best.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Exactly.
Make sure you tag them when you post this. So.
Yeah. Now, speaking of good luck, that leads us into our next question. How do you fix what they did with Snoke? Another major storyline they introduced in The Force Awakens. And there was tons of theories about Snoke. Is he Plagueis? Is he a Wizard of Oz like facade for some other character that was? Gosh, I used to know this guy's name from Legends because it was my little theory that I found this guy in Legends that I was convinced. Do you remember him? I can't remember what his name was now, but I was convinced for the better part of a year I'd figured out who Snoke was. And again, that's not the issue. It's not that I wasn't right, but I wanted to know who Snoke was. And it's exciting to speculate, and you just want an answer. And what Rian Johnson did with Snoke was say, you know what? This is a tough one to explain. I'm just going to cut him in half, and we're not going to worry about him. So does JJ pick up the pieces? Does Terrio pick up the pieces? And how do they pick up the pieces? Do we find out where Snoke came from and how he rose to power? Does it even matter at this point? So Christian, over to you.
Again, this is pure speculation. I don't think they do. Now, and to answer the other part of the question, I don't know if it matters. When the Emperor was first mentioned back in Episode 4, he was mentioned briefly in a conference room. Done. Then we got 30 seconds of him in Episode 5, and in Episode 6, he was a cackling, cartoonish villain. That was basically it. Served the purpose of finalizing Darth Vader's redemption arc so that he could toss him down the shaft and save his son. Now, I know that if you know the history of Star Wars, there was supposed to be so much going on behind the scenes. We have the benefit of the doubt and hindsight of seeing the Machiavellian nature of what he did and all his machinations during the prequel series. And so we saw what Palpatine was. It is possible that Snoke is that kind of a figure. But I really just, at this point, look, he was a dark force user. He bought Kylo to the dark side, and at this point, I'm under the impression that his character basically just existed so that Kylo could move forward to whatever the next part of his arc is. And I don't think it really matters. Sometimes a big, bad, cackling villain doesn't matter. Now, the argument could be made, going back to what Paul said, that he maybe should not have been that. Maybe he should have been something so much more and something so much more substantial. Maybe he should have been the next emperor. Maybe that's what he should have been. But at this point, I don't know if it even matters. That's the decision that they made. I'm comfortable with that decision because I'm more interested in Kylo anyway. I don't really care about Snoke. So move forward from there. My thought is they don't do anything about it. Anything is possible, though. It is possible that they decide to tell us a little bit more about him.
Lupe, what are your thoughts on Snoke?
I think that Snoke has been a flawed character from the inception, being that his placement in The Force Awakens was as a Palpatine analog. It was just another of JJ's terrible ideas of copying what was before, and playing it safe. That's where the problem first arose. So while I would agree with people who criticize The Last Jedi for ending Snoke's story arc so unceremoniously and so shockingly, that's a valid criticism, although it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the film, obviously. I feel that the problem lies with J.J. Abrams first introducing him in that way as a Palpatine analog. And I think that's why J.J. Abrams has been forced to go all the way back to introduce the actual Palpatine in Episode 9, which is coming up, and obviously we've heard his voice in trailers and that kind of stuff. So I think that the way it probably will play out, obviously this is speculation, is that Palpatine has been playing the longest of long games in the history of long games, and that Snoke was his apprentice, and there is some end game with Rey involved and also with Kylo Ren, and he just used all these characters to get to that point. And how it plays out, I don't know, but that's my speculation. Snoke was flawed from the inception, and it's going to be corrected in Episode 9.
Craig?
Yeah, Lupe could be right with that. I mean, it speaks to one of the major issues of these movies, these new movies, is that where's the master plan here? This should have all been planned out, and I really don't think it was. They're flying by the seat of their pants, and and that speaks to the issues of The Last Jedi, and then now we're left with like all these questions that still need to be answered. And I would like to know how he rose to power, and because I just think he was built up so much, and it's so interesting that he's talking about how he's been around to see the rise and fall of the Empire. Was he Plagueis? Like that would be an interesting tie-in. And I like, maybe he is part of, it probably will be worked in that he's part of Palpatine's master plan. There's so many things. Like they've even worked in stuff into some of the books, like the behind the scenes books where he's wearing a ring that has a rock that's from Mustafar, from Darth Vader's castle on Mustafar. So how does all that play in? There's so many little nuggets dropped in there if you're following along. So it's just, it'd be interesting to see how that's connected. And it's disappointing how it's just not, all this just seems very disconnected from each other.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I think I think you're entirely right that Rian Johnson was put in a difficult situation. You can't set this up without having a plan of where it's going to go. And I think that probably was what was done to Johnson. And I think Johnson said, you know what, I don't know what to do with this, so let's just toss this aside and go forward without it. Unfortunately, I think that was an important character, and I think you do have to find a way to explain it. And I looked up the guy I was talking about. His name is Kadan. So for any of you extended universe anyone listening that's familiar with extended universe, or anyone who wants to take a moment to look up on Wikipedia how this could work. He was a fallen Jedi, I believe.
Yeah.
I'd have to familiarize myself with him again, but he actually has a very similar arc to what I thought Snoke was going to be, and there is a little bit of that Wizard of Oz aspect to it too, I believe. So his name is spelled Kadan, I think. So have a look at that. It's for Kadann. Have a look at that if you're interested, and I think it's a way that you could have pulled off Snoke. Now that being said, we didn't pull that off. We cut him in half. And that seemed to be the end of it. So, what do you do? How do you fix that? I don't know. I don't have the answer. It's going to be a very hard sell. And then, like Lupe said, I think maybe that's why they brought the Emperor back. Just try to distract you. Say, you know what? We can't answer that, but here, look at this. So I do still want to know where he came from. I want some explanation of where he came from, how he rose to power, how he found Kylo, how he corrupted Kylo. I mean, these are all important things, not just for Snoke, but for Kylo's origin. So yeah, I want something, but I don't know how you fix it now that you cut him in half. And I don't like the idea that he's Plagueis, because otherwise just make Plagueis. We'll wait and see, and hopefully JJ and Terry will surprise us with something good. So that leads into our next question then, and this is another huge one, and is another contentious one. The Emperor's back. How are they going to bring him back? Is he really back? Is this a misdirect, or is he really back? I mean, it sure seems like he's back. I think you got both of the voice actors. The guy from the cartoon. What is it? What, Craig? Do you know his name, or Christian? Is it Matt something? Matt Smith or something? I can't remember his name, but there's
like
two different actors associated, I believe, with this movie. So this is a really interesting point to me, and it's something that concerns me, but I think it's obviously got to be a big plot element in The Rise of Skywalker. So Christian, let's start with you. How do you think they're going to pull this off with the Emperor?
Yeah, he's back. I mean, it definitely seems that way, and it looks like, in addition to that, if you break down the trailer, not only is he back, but he has apparently either clone troopers with him, or he's got Star Destroyers, and all. He's got a fleet that he's been able to build up. And that's pretty incredible in of itself. Now, the First Order isn't the Empire. They're different. There's a completely different political scheme going on there. There's whole totally different governments and everything like that. So it would be wrong for us to assume that the First Order is just automatically going to just bow to the Emperor immediately. One of the things that Palpatine always was obsessed with, we learned more about this in the prequels, and then if you watch and read up on the expanded saga and everything like that, he was always obsessed with extending life, creating life, finding a way to make himself invincible, quote unquote, if you will, immortal maybe. So I think this has to be handled a certain way. No matter what, it might be a little cringy whenever you, quote unquote, bring somebody back from the dead. I think it is always going to be a little cringy. We seem to do it all the time in comic book movies and accept it. So why would Star Wars be any different? But my guess is his essence, his being, his dark side, whatever, did not die when Vader chucked him down. And in one of the expanded novels, he had an entire cloning facility that was built outside of the facility that we saw on Attack of the Clones. And it was made purposely for him in case something were to happen to him so he could extend his life. That is a possibility. They could do it that way. I don't know how else they could really do it. Did he figure out a way? They talked about how Darth in the past, Plagueis could manipulate midichlorians to create life. Did he find that? Is that how he did it? To me, it's only that or the clone. That's really the only two for me that would be satisfying. But I'm not a writer, so there's definitely other ways to do it. So I'd be interested in hearing what your theories are. But I think this guy's definitely back. I don't think this is a ghost, and I don't think this is a facade. I think he's back.
Lupe, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Kristen, I really like your theory. I could, try to build up on that a little bit. The only sort of stumbling block that they have is I thought that the whole parable of Darth Plagueis the Wise and the Emperor's, involvement in that, as it was set up in the prequel trilogy, is a brilliant touch of story writing by George Lucas. I just think that if we had more definitive proof of it, and it wasn't just like a theory and it wasn't inferred, then it would be a character trait of his that could pay off in this movie. That we'll know that, all right, this is somebody that likes to cheat death, that likes to play a very Machiavellian type of long game, and this is him repeating the whole thing where you think he's dead, but hey, he comes back again. I think that them introducing the Emperor to this one is the most brilliant touch of writing that J.J. Abrams and the whole new trilogy has done in totality. I think it's going to make a lot of sense. It already does to me. Thinking of the personality of who the Emperor is, how he's been such a powerful, invisible hand for so long, it's not out of character for him to be, playing the long game again. And I can't wait to see how they do it. The possibilities are really endless, and I think that it's set up for success. And if they flunk it, then that's on them. That's my opinion about it. I really think it's going to be good.
Okay, Craig?
Yeah, and I think that is the best way to tie it in. I mean, the story's already there with Darth Plagueis, so it's already put out there, and there's so many things that they have to kind of slap in and make work that this is there to build on, and most people know the story, and it's a great story, and the whole Darth Plagueis thing is very interesting. Tie that in, use it. Did he actually learn, and did he learn it in the afterlife? Did he complete his training in the afterlife or something? There's, like you said, there's so many different paths to go on. Did he actually learn to manipulate the midichlorians to keep himself from dying? That it's great. It is a tough one though. This is going to be hard. This is going to play a big role to people liking this movie, because I think if you don't do this right, it could affect, like, hamstring the whole movie. So it's important they do this right. And I think that's really the safest way is to tie it to Darth Plagueis, and the most interesting. Like, it just makes so much sense. And then there's a lot of things you can do. His essence or his ghost, whatever, could be, trapped or tied in with the ruins of the Death Star. And he's trying to, through the Force, bring Kylo and Rey in there so he can, use their bodies or use their Force power in combination to make, the final step to coming back to life. And so maybe it's not, maybe it won't be a full back to life yet until the end, or maybe they stop him before he can do it. That might be all part of the whole movie. So a lot of ways to go, but I really think the way to do it is to tie it into Darth Plagueis.
Okay, well, I think with the Emperor, I've got a little bit different take on this. I mean, Craig, you touched on it. The way I think this can work, and I'm going to go a step back further before Plagueis, because Plagueis was, of course, obsessed with extending life, but he was researching back to the work of Darth Bane, who had who had sort of tried to learn this secret of essence transfer from, I think it was Darth Undedu, the aptly named Darth Undedu. So So I think this is how they can make it work. Now, my only concern with this is this too nerdy for the mainstream? Has this not been set up enough for the mainstream? Because in the Darth Bane trilogy of books, you do get a fairly convincing look at how the Sith could transfer their essence. It was sort of the pinnacle of Sith teaching, was to be able to transfer all your knowledge and essence into these holocrons. So you could sell me on this if you convince me that the Emperor was following this line of thought because he admired Plagueis, who admired Darth Bane, who researched Darth Undeadu. If you sell me that Plagueis had found a way to transfer his essence into a holocron so that he was dead, but Kylo somehow finds his holocron and unlocks the essence and the teachings of the Emperor. And maybe it's not a physical manifestation of the Emperor at all. Now, granted that there's two voice characters, I have a feeling that maybe one is the voice in the holocron rather than the physical manifestation. So maybe you'll get both. Personally, I don't want to see the physical manifestation. I want to see the essence trapped in a holocron in the ruins of the Death Star, and I want to see it influence Kylo. And so in my perfect world, Kylo gets deeper and deeper into the dark side, somehow gets led to this holocron that contains the Emperor's essence and is manipulated by the power of its teachings once he opens it. So that's where I want to see it go. Is that the direction they're going to go? I don't know. Is it the only way I'd be happy? No, they can sell me on. I'm willing to be sold on just about anything as long as you do it well. And like you guys said, it's such a key part to this movie. Whatever they do, they got to make it work, and they got to sell you on it. So that leads us into another big question. Is Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader going to make an appearance? I mean, seems like every movie there's that hope that Hayden Christensen will have his chance at redemption. And as we've talked about, outside of this podcast, but I mean, Darth Vader is Star Wars. I mean, as much as people love Luke, Darth Vader is what people love. He's iconic, and we had our closure for Darth Vader in Episode 6, but now here we are at Episode 9, wrapping up the Skywalker saga. So, Christian, what do you think? Are we going to see Anakin? Are we going to see Darth Vader? And how do they pull that off?
I think you raise a good point. It's difficult almost to expect that he doesn't appear in some way. He is the chosen one. Anakin has been so important to this saga. Go episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. Even his half-burnt mask was important to Kylo Ren in Force Awakens, whether we like that or not. And he had influence in The Last Jedi. There's been little bits in the trailer where it looks like Rey and Kylo are smashing Darth Vader's outfit, his suit. I don't know if that's what they are doing, but that's what it looks like that they're doing there. So that could be a Force vision or something. Might be something more metaphorical or artistic going on there. I personally feel he does come back, and I think it's going to be Anakin. I don't think it's going to be Vader. I think the only Vader we get will be visions or something like that could be pushing Kylo to go towards the dark side, maybe in that confrontation with Palpatine. But I think that it's at the end, or maybe there's some kind of resolution not resolution because we already had that, but conversation between father and son as they guide Rey moving forward. But I think we are going to get one more little piece of Anakin. My impression is it's probably going to be a Force ghost as opposed to anything else. There is a fan theory going on around there, by the way, that at the end, Rey is going to need like everybody to assist her, like all hands on deck in order to defeat Palpatine, and then like the Force ghosts would help her. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't like that idea at all. I don't at all. I'd rather that they're there to kind of guide her, maybe speak with Leia, maybe Anakin. You see some kind of resolution between Leia and Anakin because we never got that, which would also be kind of nice. So that's what I hope happens. But how can you do it, right? You got Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, you're ending it, and you don't even have the guy appear as a Force ghost? I think you have to.
Lupe, what are your thoughts?
Personally, I think that bringing Anakin or Darth Vader, it's a guaranteed hit. It is. I played the recent Jedi Fallen Order, and spoiler alert, Darth Vader makes an appearance, and oh boy, it's some of the most incredible stuff in terms of Star Wars that I've ever seen. Darth Vader is a beast. And one thing also, just as a side note to mention, is that Jedi Fallen Order is masterful. It's a Star Wars story that's masterful, and it has nothing to do with the Skywalkers, showing that the franchise can really expand and they can tell good stories. They don't have to, rely on the things that they thought they needed to. Although it has Darth Vader, so I guess that's a Skywalker. But yeah, I think that if they're going to bring in Anakin, I think that theory of how Rey, needing, all these legendary Jedi that we know, and maybe they appear as Force ghosts, and they put their hands on her in a prayer circle, and they whatever something happens.
I don't think you're wrong, Lupe. I think there's a legitimate chance that happens, you guys. I'm a little worried, but at the same time, I don't know how else you do it.
If that happens, it could be cool. It depends on how it's done. If the music is swelling, and I think bringing in Darth Vader himself will not be good. Apart from if you do something like have a Darth Vader Force Ghost for Kylo and an Anakin Force Ghost for Rey, that would actually be awesome. To be sincere, but I don't think that they need to. I don't think they need to be honest. And we'll see how it plays out. I hope it's not like overcrowded and they don't try to do too much. I don't think that they need to be sincere. That's where I stand.
Craig, where do you stand?
Well, I think it's interesting that JJ said he wants to tie everything together, and I'm not sure how you tie this all together without Anakin Vader at least being. They don't necessarily even have to be shown, but at least being a big part of it in a folklore and in a part like talking about them. But how about this? Like a trip to Vader's castle on Mustafar could be a very strong way to bring in a lot of this plot that we're talking about. You could talk about Snoke's connection there. You could have holocrons or Force Ghosts. Holocron is a way to bring in without using like the fantasy of it, like a technology kind of to bring in Vader, to bring in Anakin. Like, who knows? I guess Anakin wouldn't be in Vader's castle like that, but you could do a lot with there. And that you could even have strange, like, there's a lot of talk of Vader's castle being very important and there being a Sith temple underneath it or some kind of dark force energy. So there's a lot of power that you could play with there to create ghosts or images, and a trip there by Kylo to get closer to Vader. Like, there's so much you could do with that, and so many questions we can answer with that. I think at that ground there is ripe, and I think they've put a lot of nuggets out there in comics and in movies. It's even in Rogue One, his castle. There's a lot to work with there, so that could be really interesting. So I don't know if they're going to do it, but done right, I would love to see Anakin. I would love to see Vader. Both, if possible, would be amazing for me.
Yeah, I echo that. I know I don't want to see two separate Force ghosts, but what I do think could happen is as Kylo gets deeper into the dark side, maybe being influenced by visions of Vader in his prime, possibly brought to him by the Emperor or the Emperor's holocron. I don't want to see the evil Anakin back. So I mean, he's progressed past that part of his arc.
Yeah.
I think at this point, if there is a Force ghost, it's the good Anakin. It's the Anakin where we left off, and it's going to be on Rey's side, patting her on the back and giving her power. But definitely, I could see the Emperor using images of Vader, and boy, would I love to see that. I mean, everyone loves Vader. Look at Rogue One. I mean, the 15 seconds that Vader, not even 5 seconds that Vader was on screen, it was some of the most cinematic bliss I've had in the last decade, right? So
the most well-liked movies
nerdgasm,
have Vader.
Yeah.
The most well-liked movies in Star Wars have Vader in them.
Yeah.
Rogue One's got it. That's the one the most people like. Probably consensus about the new movies has the most fans.
Well, the Rebels, I mean, the couple episodes where Vader came back in Rebels, I mean, the best episodes. I mean, if you could fit Vader in here, even if it's not really Vader, just a vision of Vader in his prime, you got to have some of the real Vader. But I think the character you're going to see in this is Anakin's Force Ghost, and I think they are going to bring him in. Whether that's Hayden Christensen or not, I hope so. I feel bad for that guy. I want to see him go out on a high note. And I think history has probably been kinder to his characterization of Anakin now. I think he's got a lot more fans. Certainly than he did at the in the heyday of the hate against the prequels, but I'd still like to see him go out on top, and let's just hope they do it right.
Yeah, so, Paul, I really like your idea of maybe the Emperor feeding Kylo
Yeah.
visions of Vader.
Yeah.
Very, very potent vision. So he may not be a Force ghost, but that would be really cool because obviously we
That would
see
be.
that dichotomy between the dark side and the light side with Kylo, who's obviously like Vader or wants to be like Vader, and with Rey, who's like Anakin in terms of this ultra powerful Force user.
Well, let's hope for the best, and again, hope that JJ Ontario can pull it off and give us something satisfying for such an iconic character. Now, that leads to the next question: will Rey turn to the dark side, or will Kylo turn to the light? Do you guys see any sort of switch at this point in the story for either of those characters? And Christian, let's start with you. What do you see for those storylines?
You know how I feel, and as much as I really like what they've done in the sequel trilogy and the anthology movies, I don't think Disney has the balls to turn Rey to the dark side and keep her there. I just don't think they do.
Yep.
I can't see them. She's now a Disney princess at this point. So, and she's marketable, and she, even though the Skywalker saga, quote unquote, is ending, you're going to tell me she's not going to be in the future movies or any. We're still going to see her, I think, at some point. I can't see them just chucking her aside. So I don't think they have they're just not going to do it. So now what I think is going to happen, and what was interesting in Last Jedi, Luke saw the pull to the dark side from her immediately. She definitely has a pull towards that side, that she wants to tap into her darker powers. In The Force Awakens, when she was fighting against Kylo, she seemed to be actually reveling in the fact that she was beating him. So she seemed to enjoy the fact that she was smacking him down. There's definitely a dark side to Rey. So my guess is they're going to play with that in this movie a little bit more. I'm going to go back to what I said towards the beginning. I really think they're going to move towards the gray Jedi. It's something that the expanded universe has beat into our heads for a long time, and it's something that Last Jedi seemed to do. And I don't think JJ is just going to toss everything that Last Jedi did. The gray Jedi seems to be the way forward. The Sith versus the Jedi has caused these issues for millennia in the Star Wars saga. It's always been a problem, and perhaps that is the way. And I think that's what's going to happen to Kylo. I don't think Kylo dies. I don't. And I don't think he turns to the light. I think there's going to be some new balance to the Force that happens after this movie, and that's what's going to happen. They're not necessarily going to be together, but they're not necessarily going to be enemies either, and both of them can use bits of the light and bits of the dark. That's where I feel it going. But I don't feel that they're going to actually turn around and say, you know what, she's dark now. I can't see that happening.
Fair enough. Lupe, do you have any thoughts on this? Any expectations?
Well, I mean, in the trailer we saw that image of Rey definitely looking like a Sith Lord, a Sith apprentice. Is that a vision? Does she have a nightmare of where she may go? Is that a vision that Kylo Ren has that inspires him to try to recruit her, or like what is that all about? I don't think she's gonna, become a dark side user of the Force, as Christian put more eloquently than I ever could. Disney doesn't have the balls. They just don't.
Sorry.
They don't. That's just a fact. And I think if they even try to go there as like a ruse or a misdirect, it will not play out well because we know that they're not going to do that. So I don't even think they should attempt it, to be honest. As for Kylo Ren, I definitely don't want to see him redeemed or come to the light side because he's committed some of like the worst atrocities. And I mean, there is a point to be made about forgiving people and the road to redemption, even for the worst of us. I'm a Christian, and we're taught that no matter how bad you are, there's forgiveness for you, and you should forgive people 77 times, 7 times, all that good stuff. But I feel like that will be a cop out in terms of the storytelling. It might be a good lesson, but it will be a cop out. I think that he should meet a very, very painful fate. But that's the bloodlust in me talking. So that's where I stand.
So Craig, how about your bloodlust? What do you want to see?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad way to go. Like I think he might go down. He might do something good and die in the time, but still go out kind of the bad guy. A bit of good and bad, which goes with going with what Christian said. I agree with in the end, it might be a bit of the light, a bit of the dark. We're kind of be left in the middle. Um, I do think, I think Rey is going to stay good. I agree with you guys. I definitely think Rey and Kylo are going to team up. I think it's going to be something like going back to, what Lupe said about the Emperor influencing Kylo with Vader, images of Vader. That could lead him down that path. And then once he realizes that, wait a second, it didn't turn out that Vader was actually, and the Emperor actually had a rocky relationship. And Vader actually killed the Emperor. Maybe I shouldn't be following the Emperor. His plan wasn't going to be. He wanted to team up with his son and then take over the galaxy. So maybe I can team up with Rey and take over the galaxy. I think he's going to still be trying to do that as a team up, not necessarily to go to the light. So it'd be interesting to see him go out in a fit of glory, like bloodlust glory too. That would be interesting.
And it seemed like he was going in that direction in Rise of
Yeah.
and The Last Jedi too, because in that throne room scene when he was tempting
Yeah.
her, because he was like, "Yo, we're gonna rule the galaxy together. It's us."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that theme may continue, and they'll tease us with him going to the light. They'll continue to tease it, but I don't think in the end it's going to happen. And he either dies, or there's a sort of balance, but he's not fully going to the light.
So this is where I see the cinematic parallels coming in, the poetry. I see this as Kylo and the Emperor, or Kylo under the influence of the Emperor,
right?
Trying to tempt Rey to the dark side, and ultimately Rey turning Kylo, and Kylo and Rey team up, with Kylo ultimately dying in a heroic feat. I think that's where they're going with this.
Like Vader. Yeah, I could see
like
that.
Vader. I think we're setting up for that all over again. And to be honest, I'm not sure that's the wrong direction. I think it's what we've been leading to, and I think it almost feels like the most natural course of events at this point. So this is one of these places where I think a little repetition and a little symmetry with the previous trilogies might actually work.
It's safe, but if they do it right, it could still give us some gratification. Yeah.
Again, it's in the execution. I hate to say that, but there's something to it.
It's true.
So that's where I think it's going to be. So we'll see. But obviously, I think there's going to be some temptations for both. Do either turn. I think Kylo in the end does turn to the light. Rey does not turn to the dark. That's my thoughts about it. Now, sort of segueing into Kylo and the dark. One of the things I was most excited about coming out of The Force Awakens was the Knights of Ren. That Force vision with those characters, I thought, I love badass villains in masks, and those guys just look cool, and I wanted to know more. And they were nowhere to be seen. They might have been seen very briefly in The Last Jedi, but we didn't really get much of an explanation, if any, of them. So that's something I was still holding out hope for, and I'm still kind of holding out hope for. And I still make fairly regular drop-ins to the Disney store because it's right across the street from my work, and they do have the Knights of Ren figures in the first set of First Order figures, and they do look cool, and the fact that they're being marketed gives me hope. But I don't know how you fit these guys in. So Christian, what do you think? Are you interested in the Knights of Ren? Do you think they're going to have a role in the film as something more than just a cameo? Where do you think we go with them?
I'm interested in them. I don't necessarily need them. When you take a look at what happened with Kylo, it's kind of, are these his right-hand men? Are these people that, after the fall, I guess, of that Jedi school and everything like that, are they people he recruited? Were they other potential Jedi that were feeling the dark side? So up till now, they didn't necessarily serve this huge narrative purpose. But to your point, Paul, they looked badass and they looked cool. I mean, were they, when Kylo was going off and like murdering people and doing other horrible things and stuff, were they helping him out? Now, in a recent interview, J.J. Abrams said something about how he understood why Ryan didn't address them in The Last Jedi, and he felt that they're better kept mysterious than familiar, I think was his quote. That's what he said. But I think he was even questioning how they fit into this movie. I'm going to throw it to you guys because I'm going to be honest. I have no theories. I tried to think about it when I was going over the show notes. I have no idea how they could put them into this because of the way Force Awakens and Last Jedi went. Unless there's a little cameo, and if there's a little cameo, I don't think that's cool because then you're just forcing them in there for no reason. Maybe if you want to have it that now they're his generals in the First Order and they're the ones that are carrying out his will, so to speak. But then is Rey supposed to defeat, I don't know, 20 Knights of Ren and then Kylo as well? That's going to be tough. So I'm going to throw the theories to you guys because I really did try to think about it over and over again in my head as I was preparing for this. And I just don't know how they can successfully put them in and say that they're still alive, that they haven't been taken down at some point.
Right, and all within a 220-minute runtime with everything
Exactly.
else you got to do.
Right. You got
So,
Palpatine, all the other stuff that we talked about, and I'll shut up in a second. All the other stuff we just talked about with Palpatine, and do we have Gray Jedi now? Who's going to the dark side? Who's doing this? And then we haven't even talked about Poe and the rest of them, the side characters. Are you be able to do them justice longer than a 30-second to 2-minute cameo? I don't know if you can. Yeah.
Right. Lupe, any thoughts on how they can handle the Knights of Ren in this episode?
Well, I do agree that they were a bit mishandled in The Last Jedi in terms of there was such an interesting aspect that was introduced in The Force Awakens, and there was basically nothing about them in The Last Jedi. But I think that there's an interesting way that they can handle them. They can make them the Inquisitors for Kylo Ren. Simple. And they're out there hunting whoever is force sensitive, whoever says anything about the Jedi, just turn them into Inquisitors. That's all it takes.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
It's
I
interesting. Yeah.
It's no
think
rocket
it
science.
could work. No, but is that more than a 30-second saying they're off hunting, or do you actually show it and get into it?
I think you can, because don't forget the rebels are on the run, and obviously as long as the Empire rules with an iron fist, and as long as New Order is around, like, they're going to be people who resist. They're going to be people who question, and that's what you have your Inquisitors for. They're basically enforcers. So you can have them find out where the rebels are hiding, and then they're running from them from pillar to post, that sort of thing, while Kylo Ren is just sat back taking a more leadership role instead of going out and doing the grunt work.
Fair enough. That's an interesting theory. Craig, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that we only saw them as flashbacks, so they weren't really part of the Force Awakens, the storyline. They were only a flashback, so they could have already been on a mission away doing whatever they do, whatever that may be, and now they come back. But what I want to see, theories aside, I just want to see a badass fight scene with them. I just want to see them go to town. I want to see them in action. That would be great for me, and if we can interject a little bit of their background, great. But I want to see them used in combat. I'm a fan of martial arts films, so I would just love to see them throw down.
Yeah, no, I do want to know their background, but I don't need to know every detail. I just want a little bit of an explanation of how they banded together, where they came from, how they got associated with Kylo, and you can leave some mystery. Just give me something. Give me a little bit of something.
Mystery, Boba Fett mystery would be good enough.
Yeah, like a little. I want a little bit, but I don't need everything.
Yeah.
And I don't need to know each of their personalities. I just, as a group, how did these guys get together? What's their purpose? How did they get tied up with Kylo?
Leave us wanting more. Leave us wanting more.
Leave us wanting
then
more.
They can make an offshoot series on Disney Plus about them.
Yeah, I think JJ's comments about making them mysterious I think that makes sense. I agree.
It'd be great.
Yeah.
So let's hope they. I hope they have a role. I hope they're not a Captain Phasma, because boy, I spent 2 movies falling for that trick, hoping they were going to finally do something with her, and I just hope they don't do the same thing with the Knights of Ren. So I'm going in cautiously optimistic on that one. So getting speaking about our 2-hour 20-minute runtime, Christian, you hit on the fact that we haven't even got to Finn, Poe, and Rose. I've certainly had mixed feelings on those characters. I think those were high potential characters, and going back to our dirty word of execution, I think the execution has been botched horribly, especially with the comedic nature of those characters. And I'm a little biased there because, as you guys know, I don't like forced comedy. That's the quickest way to ruin a movie for me. But I've been disappointed by those characters. So what do you think happens with those 3 characters in this film? And Christian, I'll let you start us off.
My favorite of the 3 is probably Poe. And you know what, to be honest, Paul, going back to what you just said, I'm not 100% sure why I think that is. It's just he's the most likable. It could also be because Oscar Isaac is freaking awesome. So it could just be that. And I like him. Now, according to articles and interviews that I've read, and I'm sure you guys have read the same thing, we are going to get origins for both Finn and we're going to get origins for Poe. in this movie. Now, whether that's just passing dialogue and that gets tossed aside is one thing, because we do have that runtime. The most disappointing to me so far is Finn. We don't know too much about him. We know he was conscripted, I guess, when he was a kid. He was raised with basically no knowledge of his home. And he's so disgusted and he's so motivated by his conscience, and that really, no matter how much training he got, he basically spends The Last Jedi trying to get out of war. He just wants to get away from everything. And the one really awesome thing that Finn was about to do, to sacrifice himself for the Resistance, Rose comes in and bashes his freaking ship out of the way, and then he doesn't get his sacrifice. I get that they probably wanted him to survive to the next movie, but that seriously bothered me. That was like the one thing. Finn has really done nothing except be a friend to Rey in The Force Awakens, and then didn't really do much in Last Jedi except try to get away and not be a part of a war. And then he was about to do something truly epic and truly heroic, and it's so. If you guys were looking for me to be disappointed in something with Last Jedi, there you go. I was disappointed in something with Last Jedi. So I don't know exactly what they're going to say, but they did say that we are going to talk about his background. And Boyega said in an interview that some of the conspiracy theories about his character are true. So let that pique your interest for a second. If you guys are, yeah, I find that interesting. If you guys are comic book readers, by the way, Poe's background has already been explored a little bit in comic books right now. Shattered Empire revealed the identity of his parents, and there's a couple of other things that have happened there too. I think his parents were rebel pilots, and they had Poe 2 years after the Battle of Endor. I don't want to necessarily spoil anything in case anybody hasn't read those comic books, but let's just say that he has a life outside of the Resistance. There's relationships outside of the Resistance that could potentially lead to children. So I think we're going to see a little bit more about Poe. Again, it just comes down to runtime. I'm going to end on Rose. Guys, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't care about her character. She's not offensive to me. I don't hate her character. I don't care about her character. So whatever they decide to do with has got to be an improvement over what she was in Last Jedi. It has to be, because I just don't care about her character. So let me know if you guys in the course of this conversation give me some good theories, because you can make me feel better about her.
Lupe, you gonna give Rose some love?
Nope. I ain't got nothing for Rose. But I don't hate her. She's not a character that was made for me on any level. As a matter of fact, after I watched The Last Jedi, I was so surprised to see people having very strong feelings about her, because I didn't. The only thing that I would say is, in response to Christian talking about how Finn's moment of heroism was taken away from him, if Finn had died like that, I would have been really pissed off. Because once again, starting with how flawed The Force Awakens is, Finn was sold to audiences as one of the new heroes. And this is not people interpreting or reading into it. The trailers, they started with Finn.
Well, like everything out there. Everything did.
Yeah, everything revolved around him. As a matter of fact, there was an ESPN Sports Center special on lightsabers, and it was hosted by John Boyega, not by Daisy Ridley. So we were all convinced that he was going to be a Jedi, he was going to be force sensitive, he was a new amazing character, and then there was a bait and switch. He ended up being this bumbling idiot who was just a comedic side character, who failed at everything he tried to do, who was a coward, who was dishonorable. So that character has been a massive disappointment to me. And as a matter of fact, he's been a disappointment to John Boyega himself, because in some interviews he did say that he is happy to see his character sort of redeemed and taken on a more heroic role. And John Boyega is an amazing actor. He's a charismatic guy, like off screen and on screen. He has great dramatic chops. If you haven't seen him in Detroit by Catherine Bigelow, you should. It's a movie that should have won Oscars. So I feel like he definitely doesn't deserve the treatment he's gotten in this new trilogy. And I think Poe has been handled quite well, in my opinion. He's this heroic, fighter pilot. I'd like to see them continue down that path. But Finn definitely needs redemption. He needs to not be, the comedic black guy. Sorry to go there, but it is what it is. If you're falling into tropes, then you got to wear the criticism for it. I'd like to see him be be a hero, okay? Rey gets to be a hero. Can Finn also, get to be a hero and show off a little bit and, be portrayed in a better light than just being this, comedic character? And also, one more thing before I pass it on, I'm sorry for taking so long. The romance between Rose and Finn, that's not supposed to happen. There's supposed to be a romance between Finn and Rey. I do not know how that got shoved into the storyline or what's going on there. That's just a mess. But we'll see how it goes.
All right, Craig, what are your thoughts on those three characters?
Yeah, I think they've really wasted the talent of the actors behind Poe and Finn. And I completely agree with Lupe about Finn in particular. It's such a waste. I mean, they hinted, there was hints, more so in the marketing than anything, about him even having the Force and being the one. I understood what they did with that, but even in the movie, there's some hints that he may be Force sensitive, and then made him bubbling in that movie, and then doubled down on that in The Last Jedi. And Poe, they wasted him, not as badly, but I think they can do a lot more with that. And Rose, I don't. Yeah, I mean, Rose is fine. I see what they're trying to do with her. They're creating this kind of like, she's like an everyday girl, like kind of a nerd. That I think it's trying to place. It's just trying to bring in another segment of the audience. And I see that relationship as her like just being infatuated with Finn, and Finn's never going to. I don't think he should really reciprocate it. Just kind of like, yeah, you're my buddy. I think that's the way they should go with that. Hopefully that doesn't. It was very awkward, but I think it's supposed to be awkward. So yeah, I don't. By no means do I hate her at all. I kind of like you guys. Mostly she was wasted. She just wasn't used very well either. So I don't even blame her character or the actress at all. It just wasn't used very well. They could do more with her as well.
Yeah,
So,
I think you guys have covered it pretty thoroughly. I mean, I think Rose is getting the obligatory promotion. Anytime you do something of note in Star Wars, you get promoted to general or commander, and I think she's got a promotion coming in this episode. That said, I'm not even kidding. I think I read that somewhere. So
I'm just laughing because you're
yeah,
right.
I read the thing. Yeah, it's true.
so I mean, I think they'll give her title and probably shuffle her off. She'll have
Hey,
a little role.
they did it with Han Solo too. Han Solo
Yep.
went from
Yeah.
captain to like general in between.
Yeah, no, it's not unique to her. It's a Star Wars
No.
thing.
Yeah.
And Finn and Poe, I mean, I think you guys have covered it. I just want these guys to get serious. I don't think Poe's been handled well either. I think he's too good. He's almost the what do you call the male equivalent of Mary Sue? I mean, he never misses. He swoops in and will shoot down 20 TIE fighters in 5 seconds without missing. I just don't like it. So I want these characters to get more grounded, get more real, lose the comedy, and go out with some integrity and some nobility. Whether that's they don't have to be the hero that saves the day, but they got to get serious and they got to do their role and contribute. And yeah, let's just let these characters have some integrity and some respect. So lastly, before we get to our final thoughts, we've got one other major cameo in this film, and that's Lando Calrissian. And so I guess what I want to know from you guys is, do you think Lando's going to have a significant role? Is this just a fan service cameo? And do you think there's any other familiar characters we're going to see brought into this movie, maybe from the extended canon? Some of the there's always speculation. Are we going to see Ahsoka Tano? Are we going to see so-and-so from this cartoon or that extended novel? So what do you guys see for Lando, and what do you guys see for potentially any other characters that might get surprised into this film? And Christian, we'll let you start us off.
It's interesting that they're bringing Lando back. One of the things that we saw with both Han and with Luke and Leia, with everything, the the years in between Return of the Jedi and Rise of Skywalker have not necessarily been kind to our favorite heroes. And Leia and Han got divorced, and Han's back to being a scoundrel again, and all that kind of stuff. So it unfortunately, they went through a lot of different things, and it would not be out of the realm of possibility that Lando has to do a redemption arc yet again. Whether that's tried and true or tired is another story. But I think why wouldn't he go back to being a smuggler or something like that after, kind of falling away from the rebellion? So I think we are going to get a little bit more than just a fan service cameo here. I don't think they would have just shoehorned him in like that. But then again, Disney can do that once in a while. So, it is possible. Something very interesting, though, at Star Wars Celebration, the actress that's playing Janna, she had a quote. She said, Lando is a very charming man, So we could have children all over the universe. That's all I'm saying. And maybe we get to see, the big thing about the sequel trilogy has been legacy. I wonder if we're going to see a little bit of Lando's legacy, in this. So now, going to your second question, I don't know. For me, the Timothy Zahn trilogy is probably the peak of extended universe for me.
Good stuff.
Oh God, I love it. I love it. And I don't know if we're gonna get a chance to see like Mara Jade or anybody like that. The biggest would probably be Grand Admiral Thrawn. It would be fantastic to see that he's out there in the Outer Rim somewhere and suddenly comes in. Ahsoka, as you mentioned, is a fantastic character. I don't think we're going to see that. As much as I'd like to see certain characters, I don't think so. I think they're going to come full circle, end the Skywalker saga. They have Poe, they got Finn, they have a couple other things that they got to wrap up. And then we're going to do that in the future. I think maybe that's when we'll see some of those extended characters. So I don't think we're going to see them in Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, Lupe?
Personally, I feel that Lando's probably just fan service cameo. He's not really a character that was my favorite. I know people love him. I liked him when he was obviously like younger in the OG trilogies, but as the years have passed, he's just like a creepy old guy to me. I'm sorry. He just comes up weird to me. I like a young Lando, an old Lando, like being like so smarmy and like with the voice. It's like, come on, old guy, sit down somewhere. I'm sorry to offend all the Star Wars fans out there, but it's a fan.
I keep thinking of him in those Cult 45 commercials. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Honestly, like to me, it's just like, come on, dude. Like you've passed the age of acting like a douchebag. Like, come on. To me, I don't find him as charming as a lot of people find him. Doing the voice, doing the character in his old age. I don't know. But it's just a fan service cameo, in my opinion. That does nothing for me.
Okay, Craig, what do you think? I know you're more of a Lando fan.
Craig is about to kill me.
I'm like just simmering over but the boiler now. I get what you're saying, but I love Lando, and I think they could do something with him where he's grown, kind of like Christian was saying, where he's grown into something different and morphed into a wise like elder. He's learned, he's seen it all, he's learned it all, and he can help the younger generation. So I think they can do something with him, but it's obviously at the same time it's fan service that he's there, but you can have both. For me, it's never one or the other. You can have both. And as far as other characters, I think Disney would be interested in planting the seeds for the future. So dropping names and a little bit. So when you come out, or at least leaving you the opportunity for a Disney Plus series. So dropping a mention of Darth Bane in there somewhere in the folklore, talking about Plagueis. Like, I really hope Plagueis is mentioned in this film. You wouldn't have to see him, but talked about, I think would be great. Ahsoka, some mention of her would be amazing. Like Luke as a Force Ghost talking about other Jedi, that would be great. Thrawn, again, just a mention of him somewhere, like just tying him into the universe. Where is he now? Not big, we're not talking about big sections of the film, but just mentioning it within conversation of the film so that you can build on these things so they've mentioned already. So it's not a complete surprise to more casual fans when a show pops up on Disney Plus, or at least giving the opportunity to create that show on Disney Plus for these great characters that we've had from the past.
So I it's hard to say. I have a hard time seeing how Lando's going to be much more than a fan service cameo. I mean, that's not to say he'll only have a few seconds of screen time. I'm sure they'll give him a role, but I mean, at this point, I think he is there for fan service and nostalgia purposes. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Star Wars needs a little bit of that. So I'm sort of neutral on Lando. I liked him, didn't love him. So we'll see what it brings. And in terms of characters from the extended canon, I mean, I already sort of mentioned how I am excited to see the idea of the the essence transfer into the holocron. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think it's a great way to introduce the lore of Darth Bane. And I'd love to see the Darth Bane trilogy turned into a series on the streaming service down the road. So I think that's a great way to introduce that character without having to spend too much time or get too deep into that story within this film. Personally, I love Ahsoka Tano. That's a character that I really enjoyed watching in the Clone Wars animated series with my daughter. But I just don't see how there's time to shoehorn a character like that into this movie. So I don't see that that's likely to to take place here. So with that, that leads us to our final thoughts. What are your expectations? Do you think you're going to like it? Do you think they can pull this off? Do you think we're going to get the satisfying ending that that fans of Star Wars are hoping for? And is there a way that that we can all be happy and come back together in unity as a Star Wars fandom? So Christian, I'll let you tackle that question first.
You are a funny guy, Paul. No, absolutely not. Star Wars fans as a whole will never be satisfied. They will never be happy. We will never agree, and we will never hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It's just never going to happen. Star Wars fans, thank you, Lupe. He gets it. Star Wars fans hated Return of the Jedi. They hated the prequels. I'll just throw that out there. That I really don't think they're the whole fandom. The whole. I just mean everybody is not going to agree no matter what they do. This is a gargantuan task. It really is. I could love it, and then you and Craig will say, I hate it. Or the other way around. You guys could really like the direction that they decide to go, and then I'll turn around and we'll go, man, I'm really disappointed. We are just never satisfied as Star Wars fans. Now, that being said, we all love Star Wars, and it's in our hearts. And no matter what, we love these characters. We love what George Lucas created, and we want this universe to continue after that. I will say that yes, I am optimistic. I really have enjoyed what we've seen with the trailers, the little snippets that have been released so far. The cinematography looks beautiful. The special effects so far look really good. Have no idea what we could get from the performances or anything just yet, but we do know the actors and the caliber that they are because we've seen them already. If they continue some of what they did in Last Jedi and some of the stories that I talked about at the very beginning of the pod, I'll be a happy guy. And I'll be happy with the way they ended. I'm looking forward to them ending the Skywalker trilogy because I think it's saga, because I think it's time, and I think it is time to move on. We'll talk about that at the next question, but I just would like them to wrap this up, give me something to kind of tie it off. The majority of loose ends, I guess, are done, and that'll be that. But yeah, I am optimistic of it. I'm always optimistic going into a Star Wars movie because I really love this stuff. Bottom line, that's it.
Perfect. Lupe, where are you at going into this?
I have mixed feelings. As I said, I loved The Last Jedi. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. But then I am aware of who J.J. Abrams is as a filmmaker. I'm aware of who Disney is as, storytellers and filmmakers. I know that they like to play it safe. For them, it's money over everything. And I think that combination of filmmakers is going to result in a movie that does a bit more fan service, pandering, appeasing than I like in my stories. It's interesting that coming into this new trilogy, J.J. Abrams was tasked with, okay, we are going to usher Star Wars into a new era. We're going to introduce new fans to the franchise. We're going to bring new people into the fold. So that was his excuse for making something that was so milquetoast. That was like a copy paste job. And I feel like the more things change, the more things remain the same. We're having another situation where J.J. Abrams is coming to a Star Wars film, and it's going to be the end of the Skywalker saga, and we're going to be going now into new stories in terms of telling new Star Wars stories, whether it be on TV, films that come in the future, video games, whatever. And so he's tasked once again with calming everybody down, bringing everyone together, and making sure that everything gets set off. So I think that he's going to play it safe. I hope not. Fingers are crossed. I'm optimistic about it being an enjoyable and a good movie. But in terms of maybe it being sort of this masterful cinematic experience that will stay with me forever and will challenge my very notions of who we are as people and, the wonderful, most amazing things that I enjoy out of stories being told. I don't think it's going to stretch and challenge the audience that much.
Okay, Craig, what are your thoughts going in?
I'm optimistic. I'm an optimist, and I'm always hopeful that this will be good. And and I can't be concerned with what other people think because, like Christian said, like Lupe said, fans are going to hate it. They're going to love it. There's going to be all
Yep.
these mixed thoughts. I mean, anytime fans are so invested in something like they are with Star Wars, they take ownership of it. So they're into every detail. You do one little thing wrong, and 20% of people over here are going to hate it. You do the opposite, and then 30% over here are going to hate it.
Yep.
It's a no-win. So you got to look at yourself and say, let me sit down with an open mind and just take it in, reflect on it. Give it some time, even think about it, and don't go crazy on somebody if because one person likes metachlorines and somebody else thinks it's a stupid idea. Like, just if that's why you don't like it, that's why you don't like it. It's okay. It's okay to disagree on these things. And I just really want a well-made film and something just that's enjoyable, and it's an adventure, and it builds the folklore even more, and it leaves us wanting more. That's what I loved about when I was a kid. It just opened up this whole new world of wanting more. You just want more and more. So when that new movie comes out, you want to go see it because you're so excited of the potential, the possibilities that this world has. And I don't want it to start to feel more closed in, that you're taking away possibilities. And that's sort of what The Last Jedi did to me. And if I come away not feeling like that, even if it's not a perfect movie, because that's impossible, I'll be happy. I just really want to enjoy it, and I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah, Craig, I think you and I see similarly on this one again as well. I'm going in optimistic. I think they have a near impossible task in front of them, but with that in mind, I'm going in with the mindset that I'm going to be as forgiving as I can. I think there is the risk for the points that Lupe made about J.J. Abrams being a safe filmmaker and Disney being all about safe family fun and making money. That's a bit of a concern. You're going to get fan service. I'm not a huge fan of fan service, but I don't mind a little. But I believe in Chris Terrio. I think he's going to come up with something intelligent. I don't think they're going to let nonsense go to screen, and that gives me hope. One of the things that I'm really hoping for is that they lay off the comedy, get back to the adventure, get back to the fun, get back to the fast pace, the things we love about Star Wars. And yeah, I know there's always been comedy in Star Wars, but my favorite Star Wars has been when they lay off the comedy. I mean, I like Empire Strikes Back the best, and it's no coincidence that is the darkest and has the least comedy. So for me, get rid of the comedy as much as possible. And there's been some warning signs in those trailers. I mean, we saw so they fly now, they fly now. And then we saw the mind control one more recently. Oh, wow, can she do that to us? There's some warning signs, but I'm hoping that's just the marketing, because they know from the success of the MCU that people like comedy. I hope the movie itself is not comedy first. I hope it's not comedy heavy. I hope they really put some thought into it, and try to make the most thoughtful, most intelligent movie that they can. And then I until I see otherwise, I'm going to believe that these guys can pull it off. So I'm going in with cautious optimism, but optimism nonetheless. So with that, this is going to bring a conclusion to the Skywalker saga. They've made that clear. So this is going to tie everything up and presumably put a fairly neat bow on it. So with that conclusion to the Skywalker saga, before we close out this podcast, let's talk briefly about where we see the future of the franchise going. If they actually do wrap everything up, where do you see the franchise going from here? And that's both theatrical and on streaming with Disney Plus, where we've seen The Mandalorian rise to a level of popularity I think that is seldom been seen under Disney Star Wars. So, Christian, where do you see this going now once the Skywalker saga wraps up once and for all?
It's an interesting point, Paul. I mean, now that you have begun the streaming wars, right? So now that you have Disney Plus, they can seriously expand if they want to, and they've already proven with The Mandalorian that they'll pump money into something if they think that they could get something back out of it, and create a serious, amazing looking show. With the jury's still out until the show is over on how everybody enjoyed it and what the reviews are going to be. But so far, it's been very well received by the majority of the community and the majority of people out there. So if they want to, they can really expand this universe in a very lush way. I'm happy that the Skywalker saga is wrapping up. Paul and I did in the Rogue Squadron. Episode 1, we talked a little bit about what we would like to see in the future, and one of the things that both of us agreed on was Knights of the Old Republic. And seeing that section probably expanded on. One of the things that Star Wars seems to have gone back to a lot is what happened, like kind of like in between the rebellion. So there's still a lot of Empire versus Rebel stuff, even if it's not the focus, it's what's going on in the background. I'd like them to start moving away from that. The two things I would really like to see is either show us the Knights of the Old Republic, show us how the rule of two with the Sith started, things like that, or where does the universe go from here in this new quote unquote future timeline? Now, Rey's timeline and everything. Let's go from there. Let's stop going back to the Skywalker time. Let's stop going back to Palpatine, Vader, and everything and all that. Let's either go far future or deep into the past so we can start getting into Star Wars lore and really get into the big expanded universe. That would be great. We do know that we're getting in the future, we're getting more Clone Wars. We're getting another season of that. We're getting an Obi-Wan series. But again, even Obi-Wan and Cassian Andor, that goes back to that time period again. I don't know if we need to do that. I think there's a lot. You guys were just talking about Knights of Ren. That could be Disney Plus. I mean, there's a lot that they could do. There's so many ways that they could go. I would just like them to stay out of that middle time period. That would be it.
Okay, Lupe.
It's ironic that we're talking about the future of the franchise when the most potent and promising stories could be far, far, far back in the past. I mean, I'm not talking about a long time ago. I'm talking about, Knights of the Old Republic, that sort of time period. And I think a lot of people are very attracted to that time because it was a more, there was more, is the word to use savagery? Because there weren't as many rules to who the Jedi are and there wasn't as much peace. So there's a lot more gray area to explore rather than sort of how rigid the storytelling has become in terms of what the Jedi can do and what they can do, who the Sith are, who the Sith aren't, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's the part of the future that I'm most excited to see them explore, and one that they have no choice but to, because fans of the entire saga are just chomping at the bit for anything that they can offer in that regards. I echo Christian's sentiments. Skywalker saga, let's put a wrap to it. We can have cameos and flashbacks from time to time, but as a main storyline, let's leave that in the past. It's wrapped up very well. If Star Wars is the epic saga, the epic world that it claims to be, and it is, spoiler alerts, it can survive without the Skywalkers, and it will. So I would like to see them do things like, for example, the Mandalorian that they're doing. Brilliant idea. Characters like Ahsoka Tano, they can do stuff with her and make sure that they focus on more intimate stories of, people in different worlds or their species, or it doesn't always have to relate to the Skywalker through line. And I think that there's a lot to explore, the different platforms. Don't forget, video games are very cinematic nowadays. Obviously streaming platforms, cinema as well, comic books. I think that they just need to make sure they put a lot of money into it, because Star Wars has always told stories across these mediums. It's just the amount of investment is sort of what determines the sort of exposure it gets, the event status, the quality. So as long as they put the right, people behind it, the right amount of resources, I think the sky's the limit. And I'm very excited to see where they go in the future. I will remain a casual fan. I'll remain a casual onlooker. If it flourishes, I'll happily engage. If it, falters, it's no skin off my back. So there, that's me.
All right, Craig, your thoughts?
Yeah, I like, there's so many possibilities out there. And this with the Skywalker series coming to a close here, I think one thing that's important, the most important aspect is not so much that it's Skywalker, it's the Force. The Force is really important, and what sometimes is missing from some of the stuff Disney's trying to do. And I think you shouldn't dance around it. Go back and tell the story of what this is all about and the origins of the Sith and the Jedi, and tell that story. Use Darth Vader. So Obi-Wan Kenobi series can have kind of parallel to Obi-Wan on Tatooine, what's happening with Darth Vader in the rest of the galaxy. We don't have to be stuck just on Tatooine. It's kind of like two stories happening and then climaxing the original Star Wars: A New Hope. So it can lead right into that if they want to do something like that, or have a standalone Darth Vader series. Don't waste that character. He's gold. Do something with that. I agree with Christian. The Old Republic stuff is amazing. There's so many stories to be told there. Darth Bane stuff, amazing. I know Paul will go into that, so I won't saturate the conversation with that. Me and Paul agree a lot on Darth Bane. There's still a lot of ground between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. I think they've been waiting to finish this story, the new movies, before they go back and really start filling in the gaps there. There's a lot of room. And Mandalorian starting that. That's 5 years after Return of the Jedi. I love what they've done with that show. Again, tons of potential. I'd like to see some of those episodes be longer, them dig in a little more, but I love the potential and I love the look of what they're doing. So, which gives me great hope that they are able to do some amazing things the way they've done it with Mandalorian. And Knights of Ren too. I dropped that in the episode, is that they could plant the seed now to create some interest for a standalone series, Disney Plus, for Knights of Ren. So with Disney Plus, there's just so much opportunity. And then with the movies, then dig more into the Force, get into the Old Republic stuff would be a great way to go with the movies. Or just what's happening with the Force as a continuation, what's happening with it after Rise of Skywalker. So yeah, again, lots of potential out there.
Yeah, I think you guys have covered most of it. I mean, like you said, there's 3 or 4 things that I'd like to see. I think we're all in agreement that Old Republic is the way to go. For me, you got to get away from these 9 movies, and not a little bit away, far away, because you don't want to touch on anything. Like, let this be wrapped up in a bow, and now let's move far away. And Old Republic is 3,000 years prior, 3 or 4,000 years prior. Darth Bane is 1,000 years prior. I think those are both great stories to tell. I agree. Old Republic as the new cinematic theatrical trilogy. Darth Bane, I think, would make a great. You take that trilogy of books, I think it would make a great, smaller, more maybe more intimate, character-driven series on Disney Plus. Although to be done right, it's probably not the most child-friendly story, but I think you could still do it with a PG-13 rating. It's not. It doesn't have to be something that excludes kids and families. It's just a little darker in tone and focus because it is so oriented on the history of the Sith and the rule of 2. And like you said, Craig, Darth Vader, I mean, he's gold. And we've never really got that full taste of Darth Vader. I mean, yeah, you certainly get him in the original trilogy, but I think if you sum up all the minutes he's on screen, it's still pretty minimal. I think there's probably one story left to tell, and that's the story right after the end of episode 3 leading up to Rogue One. And they've already touched on that in the comics, so I hope that they haven't already put themselves in a position where you can't do that. But I would love to see a Darth Vader movie or series, but preferably movie. I think with Darth Vader, less is more, and you want to do it absolutely the best you can do it with the highest budget, the most impactful. Don't drag it out with filler, because filler is the death of Star Wars, and that's my concern with Disney Star Wars, is there's so much filler, and I even see elements of that creeping into The Mandalorian. I don't love it as much as you guys do. I like it. I think it's got the right look, but it's giving me the Rebels filler feel a little bit, and that worries me about anything Disney puts on their streaming service. So you got to keep the quality high. You can't waste time, and so I think there's some avenues they can go. I just hope they do it right, and I hope they're not scared to do it right, because they have to maintain the marketability and the 4-quadrant family appeal. So, with that, I think that brings us to our close. We've covered a lot. The podcast has run a little longer than I'd imagined, but I think we've had a lot of good conversation today. I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts, even when we disagree. Christian and Lupe, I think you guys were on Team A, and Craig and I were on Team B for a lot of these points. But I like that balance. I like that discussion. I really enjoyed this today. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us, especially those of you that have stuck it out to the bitter end here. And just remind you that you guys can find us on YouTube. This is under the Film Exiles. You can find us on Twitter at the Film Exiles. This is on audio podcast, so you can get us. We originate on Anchor, but we're also on Apple Podcast. We're on Google Podcast. We're on Spotify and others. And as Christian and I have talked about or mentioned briefly during the show, we're also in the middle of a 4-part Star Wars series that we're doing, which is actually going to culminate in a review of the the Rise of Skywalker, and that's called Rogue Squadron. It's on the Exiles Network. You can also find that on YouTube and on various audio podcast channels. Again, you can find this on Apple, Google, Spotify, and SoundCloud for that one. So with that, I'll let each of you tell us where you can find us. Christian, starting with you, where can we find you?
Hey man, no matter what, whether you're Team A, Team B, we're all Team Star Wars here. That's it. So this was a great conversation. Love these movies. Love talking with you guys, and I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you out there. You can catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at the same place. It's at chart6363.
Okay, and Lupe, where can our listeners find you?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I hope you guys invite me for future installments, especially for a review of the Rise of Skywalker, so we can, sort of see where our theories led and our expectations. And, I definitely love to continue the conversation with our audience on Twitter at LiveLoveLupe.
Okay, Craig, where can we find you? And this is your chance to tell us a little bit about the Last Dragon tribute as well.
Yeah, first off, I just want to thank you guys for allowing me to come on with you guys and as an outsider and join in and have some fun. I really enjoyed it. And hopefully I didn't do too badly and you'll be open to having me come back to do the sum up of the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be great. So yeah, I do run a Last Dragon fan website. And if you've never heard of the movie, it sounds like a Bruce Lee movie, but it's really a movie about a black guy who idolizes Bruce Lee. And it's from the 80s. And if you've seen it, you love it. It's just one of those films that's got a huge cult following. It's very 80s. It comes across a little cheesy, but there's a much deeper story to it when you do pay attention and get past the 80s cheesiness of it. Just a great story of it's like a fairy tale adventure, hero's journey. If you've never seen it, check it out, and then come check me out at the Last Dragon Tribute. And I have Instagram and Twitter at the Last Glow. And my personal Twitter is the Craig Sutton, at the Craig Sutton. You can find me there as well. So again, thanks guys. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks to each of you. Enjoyed this conversation again. Love talking with you guys, especially Star Wars. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter at _Paul_P. And regardless of how you're listening to this pod, we would love to hear your feedback. Give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. We're happy to engage in conversation online. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And thanks again, everyone, for listening.